Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's May 1st. May 1st, 2017. Happy what do we want to say? It's Happy Monday, Happy May Day, Happy Loyalty Day. I understand I was lectured plenty over the weekend. I didn't actually get a chance to say anything about it being Loyalty Day, but it didn't matter. Before I could even wake up and find out it was Loyalty Day, or today was being declared Loyalty Day by Donald Trump, my inbox was full of messages that I should not be angry about it because it was already Loyalty Day and he wasn't declaring anything. And how could I be so ignorant of history or ignorant or whatever? I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm a little distracted trying to do the show. My swash is unbuckled, as it turns out, and I don't know if I can carry through the rest of the day. Also, by the way, big science experiment underway today. Greg Dworkin will be with us. I know he loves science. I can ask him. Big question on everyone's mind. How long can you leave scallion cream cheese in the car after you buy it at the bagel store and still bring it inside and have it be good for Monday morning breakfast without hurting yourself? So we're in on that experiment. I got a big grant from the National Bagel Institute, and we're trying that one out. So if at any point during the show I just start playing music and never come back, the answer is less than, say, 3 hours or so. We're taking a big chance. It smells fine, but it's scallion cream cheese. What does that smell like when it's good? I don't know. All right, well, neither those things really matter. It's important. Big question of the day. Why couldn't they work out the Civil War? Apparently, that's this morning's outrage about Donald Trump. I don't know what Trump himself is tweeting about yet. I haven't even gotten to that. Big weekend. We'll catch up on all the news. Let's see. The president did get to the golf course yesterday, the one out by me, I understand, but they didn't make a big deal out of it. So I don't know if he hit the links. It was a warm day. He would have been schwitzing like a pig. Oy, if he had been out there yesterday. It was very humid. So I imagine that, of course, he got a chance to play, but at least he visited his golf course, didn't miss a weekend looking after his properties. I do believe he'll be claiming that on his taxes. Not that you'll ever find out about that. Let's see. What other fun things are going on today? Well, for one thing, yes, the excerpt that everyone is tweeting around, I haven't looked at the rest of this, an interview with who's Selena Zito. Does anybody know? I'm sure all the rest of you know. I don't know who that person is, but I pay very little attention to those things. So, serves me right. I'm going to get right on the radio and say, I don't know, what channel, what outlet, what newspaper. He's doing a lot of interviews these days, and it's fun. It's fantastic. We get a transcript of how dumb he is. Today's morning outrage is this exchange. President Trump, talking to Selena Zito about, Andrew Jackson, I guess we could say controversial figure. Although, honestly, I guess if you visited this country as a complete alien, and by which I mean space alien, you should call the voice number and report any space aliens you see. But from an outside perspective, I guess if you arrived in this country and you learned how to use the ATMs because you were traveling, you would think we loved Andrew Jackson still, and that he was universally regarded as the most popular political figure of all time because the ATMs, which are clearly a very important thing to us, some sort of altar or a religious ceremony during which people visit this machine and make confessions of some sort and are rewarded with certificates of absolution, I guess you might guess these things are, several of them at a time, and they all bear the picture of Andrew Jackson, swashbuckler. I'm not sure where he came up with that one, but I think actually Bill in Portland, Maine had a good guess as to why this might have happened. I should look. I see a couple of different versions of the transcript being passed around. Here's the one I got tweeted by Edward Isaac Dovere of Politico, I believe. We'll look that up and make sure I was right. Here's Trump's full answer on swashbuckler, quote-unquote swashbuckler, Andrew Jackson in the Civil War. President Trump beginning in this excerpt by saying his wife died, not his wife, but Andrew Jackson's wife. We're talking about swashbuckling Andy J, as they called him in the day. They destroyed his wife and she died. He was a swashbuckler, but when his wife died, he visited her grave every day. That's not very swashy, but I guess that's counterintuitive. I visited her grave, actually, because I was in Tennessee. That's where the grave is, so it made it very easy, of course. Selena Zito says, that's right, you were in Tennessee. By golly. Okay. President Trump then says, and it was amazing. The people of Tennessee are amazing people. I'm sure they are. They love Andrew Jackson. Not sure they do, but okay. I mean, he was from Tennessee, so. They love Andrew Jackson in Tennessee. Selena Zito says, he's a fascinating, and I can't disagree, he's fascinating. Hitler, fascinating, right? Am I comparing him to Hitler? In their fascinatingness? Yes. Swashbucklingness, not so much. President Trump then continues and said, I mean, had Andrew Jackson been a little later, like in history, you wouldn't have had the Civil War. Questionable. He was a very tough person, but he had a big heart. He was really angry that he saw what was happening with regard to the Civil War, which of course happened several years after he died. He said, there's no reason for this. The war, not the death. The reason for death. Can we really question this? People don't realize, the Civil War, if you think about it, why? People don't ask that question. Why do we have the Civil War? I think they do ask that question. They come up with terrible answers. Economic anxiety, whatever, but they do ask that question every day. In history class around the country, thousands upon thousands of children are asked that question. Teachers are asked that question. Professors are asked. Everybody's asking that question. There's no question more asked about the Civil War, I would guess. But to him, nobody asks it because he never asked it. Anyway, people don't ask that question, but why was there a Civil War? Why couldn't that one have been worked out? And of course, who better to have worked that particular issue out than Donald Trump, master negotiator, art of the deal, right? We are going to have to front the money for the wall that Mexico has refused to pay for, but I'm pretty sure he would have worked out the Civil War. He could work out almost anything. I imagined a little dialogue this morning about Donald Trump wandering by and seeing a sign in their window, help wanted, working out the Civil War. Don't want to have a Civil War? Come on in if you think you can help us work out the problems underlying the Civil War. And take the sign out of the window. He's confident. Walks in. Hey, I'm here to see you about the job working out the Civil War. Terrific. Good to see. Thank you for taking up the challenge. What kind of experience have you got? Well, I lost all my money and went bankrupt on casinos, but I'm pretty sure this one I can work out. We'll see. I mean, I don't know. I say we give the guy a chance. Anyway, as I said, happy Loyalty Day. As Bill reminds me, I mentioned in the morning tweet to everyone. So, Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, being loyal to you or vice versa. I don't know which one's which, but Greg Dworkin's loyal to us. He's here as usual on Mondays to help us catch up on things that happened over the weekend. And there were a few. Civil War, for one. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
I am fine. Have you worked it out yet?
Worked out the Civil War?
Yes.
Not exactly.
No.
But, look, all I know is, I think the whole thing was all about, reenactment, jobs,
The
whole reason that we had the Civil War is Civil War reenactors could have something to do in 2017. I don't think there was anything else going on.
We have the uniforms. We might as well go forward with this.
Yeah. And also monuments. Got to build monuments. That's the whole point.
Absolutely. Plus, of course, the monument tearing down business a couple hundred years later.
Also, as far as I understand it, everybody got to be a colonel.
I think so. All the Kentuckians did.
Even the ladies. Everybody was a colonel.
That's right. And Kentucky Derby, is that coming or did I miss it?
I don't know.
I forgot. All right.
It's either coming or you missed it because, if it's not today, that's always the situation.
Yes. That's history for you.
Yeah, and I'm glad to straighten you out on that.
Thank you. Well, we should have worked that one out. Probably.
Time. What is it as a concept? So, a lot of stuff happened over the weekend. Let me start with some cool stuff. This morning when I did the pundit roundup, I was doing a world roundup.
All right.
Okay. National Hockey League setting is in Edmonton, Stanley Cup. And it's the first tweet I have on my pundit roundup this morning.
Let me go see that. Okay.
Actually tweeted by the NHL. So a Canadian country rock type guy is going to be singing the national anthem. And the nice thing about Canadian-American hockey games is you always sing both anthems. That's been a tradition for years and years and years.
It's nice.
It may well be that the only people in the United States who happen to know what the Canadian national anthem is hockey players.
Right.
And also hockey fans, because, we get to see it all the time.
Baseball occasionally brings us
Baseball occasionally, but hockey all the time.
You know what? I think they ignore it. The hockey people, hockey is so Canada-centric.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
well, look, they filled this stadium all the way.
They did, unlike Trump rallies.
Yeah.
So what happened is that the microphone failed.
Oh.
When the guy was starting to sing.
I have a recommendation for them.
So we do, and the mics work pretty well, but he didn't have that one. It looks like that one. It looks like one of those Mr. Mike things you pick up and hold in your hand. So it didn't work, and he being the consummate stage performer that he is, just shrugged his shoulders and say, "Hey, y'all, just join, sing, let's do this together."
All right.
So the entire stadium sung the American national anthem, which of course they knew every word to because they're hockey fans. Mm-hmm. So it was really very cool.
All right.
And they did a nice job too.
Yeah. Thank you, Canada.
Yeah. So it was very, very sweet.
Please don't.
Meantime, Stephen Colbert rewrote the words to "O Canada."
Oh yeah.
As a favorite of them. Well, apparently they've passed a bill that takes one of the lines in the national anthem, and they've rewritten it to make it a little bit more gender neutral.
Okay.
And this is an actual thing. So I'm scrolling down here. What the line was: "True patriot love and all thy sons command," and they're going to make it more gender neutral. So of course Colbert took the opportunity to rewrite the entire song, pointing out that their prime minister is hot. But
Oh well.
It was good. So that was fun.
Canada.
Other international things of note here in the Buenos Aires Journal. This is a English non-skilled translation of a CNN Spanish report. So the meaning gets a little mangled. But what it says is the Mauricio Macri administration reverted a decision to award former U.S. President Jimmy Carter the Order of the Liberator General San Martin, the maximum distinction the country can give to a foreign personality, under pressure from U.S. Donald Trump. Trump didn't want Carter to get the award, so the award's been postponed.
What? Why? Who?
Because like they
He
never
didn't
get
get one yet? What is he in a beef? He's now in a beef with Jimmy Carter.
Well,
He's 100 years old.
Right. Exactly. Peace guy. Everybody agrees that Carter wasn't the greatest president in the world, but was probably our best post-president ever.
Yes. And he can't have the award because Donald Trump doesn't want it.
Yeah.
And I guess that makes a big difference. He's got
Well, it wasn't to him.
apartment buildings
Right?
there.
I mean, you can't give an award to somebody else.
Right.
Only to me. When you're ready to give it to me, I'll say okay.
One for you, one for him.
Right. Our buddy Jake McIntyre points out today is May Day.
It is.
We are one of the 5 or 6 or 7 countries that doesn't celebrate it as a holiday, but it's International Labor Day and was chosen as such to commemorate the massacre of workers rallying for the 8-hour day in Chicago back in the day.
Yeah, they shouldn't have killed those guys. Why couldn't they have worked that one out?
I don't know. But it was supposed to be 8 hours of work, 8 hours of recreation, and 8 hours of rest.
Yeah. I would have preferred to see that one simply negotiated.
Yeah, I suppose. In this day and age with Twitter and smartphones, you don't get just 8 hours of work, though. No. I promise you.
Oh, that's true.
Doctors are also on call, so that doesn't work out. Anyway, over in England, UK, here's one from the Washington Post. After a hard left turn under Jeremy Corbyn, Britain's Labour Party on course for historic defeat. I'm pretty sure the only reason that's going to happen is they spell Labour wrong. They stick an extra U in it.
Oh, yeah. Well,
like they do in Canada.
I think that's actually a union rule. They have to use that many extra letter each time.
Well, that's why they're going to lose.
Yeah. Well, we hate Labour.
This is all about austerity, and austerity says you really should have less letters in your words if you possibly can.
That's right.
We do that on Twitter all the time.
We should probably massacre.
We just do a U instead of YOU. I mean, it's the way it should be.
Right. Thank you for disrupting language, Twitter.
Yeah. In 2015, Britain's Labour Party tacked to the left, repudiating the middle way philosophy that had won at 3 elections under Tony Blair not that he's a favorite of mine. Voters responded by handing the party its worst defeat in 3 decades. Rather than scramble back toward the center, Labour lurched further left, because whenever you move left, it's a lurch, remember that.
Right.
The party elected as its leader Jeremy Corbyn, a white-bearded baby boomer from the backbenches, who, like Bernie, in the United Bew States, ignited a big probable movement among young backtivists with his attacks on the rigged capitalist system and unquestioned fidelity to socialist ideals. Now, with less than 6 weeks to go before Britain votes one more time, the Corbyn-led Labour Party is on course for an electoral beatdown so broad and so deep, it would make the drubbing the party took in 2015 look like a triumph. Isn't that sweet? And they don't seem to have a particularly, optimistic view of his chances.
Well,
I just get that vibe from the story.
I guess. They should be reaching out and trying to understand his voters, though.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, it was a rough weekend for those voters.
Okay.
All around the world.
Jean-Luc Mélenchon goes on TV news to warn his voters away from the terrible error of voting for Marine Le Pen.
Yes. Okay.
Right? So I don't know that he's actually endorsed Macron, remember?
Right.
Macron.
Oh, that guy. Yes.
And then Macron. So Jean-Luc Mélenchon goes on TV news to warn his voters away. Now, if it had been Jean-Luc Picard who went on TV to warn his voters away, it would be like unanimous. But it wasn't. It was Jean-Luc Mélenchon, so we'll see what happens. So at least he said don't vote for her. He didn't say vote for him, but at least he said don't vote for her.
Right. Okay.
Right. So a little bit late, but, these election spaces aren't really all that long, so we'll see how that works out.
Okay.
All right, so that's it for my world. Oh, I suppose I have one more. It's Duarte from the Philippines.
Yes, it's and he's got like the Labor folks with the extra U. He has an extra T in his name. I keep wanting to say Duarte, but he's Duterte. He's got a T in there. Duarte.
Duarte.
T. Duarte. I don't know.
So,
I can't make it work.
Anyway, the guy's kind of a monster. He wants to assassinate everybody who vigilantes think is a drug dealer. So naturally, because there's a hotel in Manila that the assistant to the White House, Ivanka, advertises for, no conflict of interest there, he'll be invited to the White House.
Okay. Yes, I'm excited about the prospects for all of our opioid-addicted Trump voters when he comes by.
Well, more to say on that. But, sort of kind of interesting that all of this happens.
I might be on the Duterte train.
Duterte?
I guess.
Twain?
Yes. I don't know.
Duterte Twain.
I'm excited about the way this is going to work out.
About this.
Yeah. By the way, Bill objects to my calling Carter like 100 years old. He's 92.
Yeah.
And he does build houses. I didn't say he couldn't build a house.
He's more spry at 92 than I am at my age.
Right. But you know who you don't say is spry? A 27-year-old. People who are like 100 who build houses, they're spry. This is a spry guy.
Well, let this lurch. That's just the way it is. It's alliteration.
How did he end up as the butler for the Addams family? This lurch.
I don't know. I
had no idea he was such a leftist, but I guess the life of service will do that to you.
So anyway, that's the round the world roundup and kind of sort of interesting things that are going on there. Some domestic things which I think are semi-important. On the one hand, last night Congress reached a deal to keep the government open through September.
Oh, yes. Good work. Excellent.
Money for the wall is forbidden.
They could work that out. Oh, and that too.
Planned Parenthood is funded. Big win for Trump.
Yeah. He's doing great. He probably would have fixed this civil war.
Yeah, if he keeps having big wins like that, maybe people will like him a little more.
I'm enjoying it.
So, the other shoe, however, is that now that has happened, it's time for Zombie Healthcare 3.0 to come back. And they're talking about putting a vote on the table on Wednesday. So people have 2 days to call the representatives and say this is a terrible idea.
They said that last week.
Yeah. But just because they say it doesn't mean it happens.
Right.
Obviously, if they had the votes, they'd do it today. But still, the fact that they're even close to pushing for another vote is of great interest. Now, the expectation is that if it passes the House, big if, then it fails in the Senate. and Trump gets to call it a win because all he wants is wins. He doesn't really care what's in bills. He just wants a vote, and he wants to say, see, I won a vote, and I did it through force of my personality, and the fact that it's not really a law doesn't matter. In my head, I'll pretend it is, and then we'll go from there. The other side of the coin is that if you are really interested in turning the House blue, this vote is a great opportunity. Because Republicans who go on record as voting for this piece of crap are going to be vulnerable in the fall, at least in some of the swingier districts.
Yes. Still, I prefer losing without the vote.
Yeah, I prefer no vote at all.
Right.
It's just a dumb idea. But, that's the whole thing about Republicans. They really don't know how to govern. They think that this is how you do it.
Yes. They do need to show
if you can't get it together to pass a real bill, and you can't because you don't really understand what's in it, then at least pass a symbolic bill and say that you did.
Yes, maybe
that
some
they
sort of...
They've been doing that for 8 years.
Yeah, that's true. And I will say their productivity on repeal bills is way, way down under Trump. They couldn't stop voting to repeal it under Obama. But this guy can't seem to get one of these votes, which is, I guess, why he wants it so badly.
Robert Perrin, the New York Times, has the headline, Pushing for Vote on Healthcare Bill, Trump Seems Unclear on Its Details.
To say the least.
So it's really hard to tell, to be fair to Trump, whether he's really lying about what's in the bill. Because if he doesn't know what's in the bill, he can't really be lying about it.
Yes,
so perhaps
he's ignorant
the New York Times
perhaps.
didn't use lying in the headline based on a technicality.
It may be. And ordinarily I would say no. The president knows. He's just lying. This president might not know. And he may have been told and still not know.
Right. So this morning, just because a whole lot happened over the weekend, because a whole lot happens every weekend,
yes.
And it seems like a whole lot happens between the times that I'm on the show. Anyway, we're playing lightning round a little bit here.
Yeah.
But next story is by Rosalind Helderman and Tom Hamburger. I love Tom Hamburger's name. It makes me hungry. How the Republican right found allies in Russia. It's pretty fascinating, and it's also a lead into another story. Growing up in the 80s, Brian Brown was taught to think of the communist Soviet Union as a dark and evil place.
Yes.
But Brown, a leading opponent of same-sex marriage, said that in the past few years, he has started meeting Russians at conferences on family issues and finding many kindred spirits. Doesn't say anything about whether they decided to fund him. That's been a little bit of a problem with the Trump administration. More to come on that over the next few weeks as we see who gets indicted. Brown, president of the National Organization of Marriage, or NAM, which is different than Vietnam NAM.
Right.
President of NAM has visited Moscow 4 times in 4 years, including a 2013 trip during which he testified before the Duma as Russia adopted a series of anti-gay laws. What I realized was that there was a great change happening in the former Soviet Union. There was a real push to reinstall Christian values in the public square. A significant shift has been underway in recent years across the Republican right. Gun rights, terrorism, same-sex marriage, many leading advocates on the right who grew frustrated with the country's leftward tilt under President Obama have forged ties with well-connected Russians. Is that the same thing as being funded by them? And come to see that country's authoritarian leader, Vladimir Putin, as a potential ally. Really interesting story.
That is that's a really good one that I think should now be required reading. It helps explain what's going on. I think we knew this, but I don't know if anybody put it quite as plainly. Right-wingers, frustrated by their inability to get anyone interested in their agenda in the United States, found an audience found people
money.
who would pay for them to speak to audiences that may not have known what the hell they were saying
right.
in Russia.
I mean, who cares about whether another audience outside the U.S. is listening to you, but if they're going to pay you, that's a different story. Same thing that happened to the Trump administration, and that working for a foreign power and getting paid by them, not that the story says that, makes it very interesting.
Yeah, where was this one?
It was the Washington Post.
Okay.
And did I have it in there in your lineup there? If I didn't, I will make sure.
Yes, there it is. I see it. I got it.
Okay.
Yep.
How the Republican right.
Right.
Okay, and then just below that one, the Newsweek story. Opinion, Rick Perlstein, the alt-right is gunning for anti-Trump protesters, and he's not being metaphorical.
Yeah.
A friend writes, for basically the past 6 months or so, I've been trying to tell my lefty friends in so many words, there are a bunch of people on the internet who are waiting for someone to tell them it's okay to start shooting you. Yes. Excuse me, it says start shooting at you. I don't want to incite. Okay, didn't say they were going to hit you. They're more likely to hit themselves, but still. He became concerned when a thread at the non-political firearms enthusiast website he regularly follows became filled with comments in all caps. You have to do it in all caps. You can't use your inside voice.
Right.
Referring to liberals as enemies who must be shot. Developments both online and off. Now remember, this is Rick Perlstein writing. Developments both online and off following Donald Trump's election have caused me to share his concern. In December, an author at the biggest and most explicitly non-political gun site, the Firearms Blog, its tagline is Firearms, Not Politics, recounted his experience with an outfit that offers tactical training based on the methods of the Israel Defense Forces. The moderator soon had to begin deleting comments. One that remains protested as if through the millennia hundreds of nations, principalities, and city-states reached the same conclusions and urged the curious to check out judaism.is/genocide.html. I don't know if that's the series or the movie, where one can watch the film Jewish Ritual Murder Revisited, The Hidden Cult. Oh, that sounds good. I wonder if it was released at Passover. 4 days after Donald Trump's inauguration, a community member on a moderate firearms law site, PA Gun Blog, Civil Redoubt, welcoming active participation by both firearms enthusiasts and people who hate them, described the shock from the morning's web surf when a longtime commenter, quote, who I recognize as right-leaning but mostly moderate, commented that the Jews own and control everything in America. Not many months ago, no one except a flaming neo-Nazi would have dreamed of expressing such an opinion, but today it seems to have become an acceptable element of our discourse. I notice that no one replied to or castigated the comment. And then he gives more examples, including the Milo Yiannopoulos speech at Berkeley, where a couple of weeks before, preceded less than 2 weeks earlier by the shooting of a Milo protester in Seattle by a gunman who was yet to be charged with any crime.
Yeah.
So the protester was shot, and so far no crime.
Dang.
So stuff is happening, and for people who follow this online, and we have several people who do, like J.J. Abrams and others, it's worth just keeping this in the back of your mind, that just as incidents have increased, racial deterioration according to polls since the Obama administration, increase in anti-Semitic notable events by people who track those things. This is something that is also worth tracking as well.
Yes. Speaking of anti-Semitism, etc., I managed to sneak Sebastian Gorka in under the wire on Friday in anticipation that he would be out by Monday, and it looks like we're right.
Yeah, he's out by Monday. Yeah, I was going to add that, so don't forget Seb is out, too.
Yes. Okay.
He's leaving the White House to go explore further the war of ideas.
Yes.
And the war on competence, which apparently he's losing.
I saw Fox News had, I thought the best headline on it was, Sebastian Gorka to accept role outside White House. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good one.
In lieu of a doctorate, I suppose.
Yes, right. So I'll accept a role outside the White House.
Yeah,
Mighty
coffee
Casey
and a roll,
accepts role
and that's
outside.
about all you get. Bye.
Okay. So on his way out. So at least we got him on the record. I was waiting, and I waited too long to talk about Sebastian Gorka. Now he is not quite an irrelevancy, but we'll be able to poke fun at him from a greater distance, I guess.
Right. Here's one from ABC News. Remember we talked a little bit about the IDC, the I Don't Care caucus, the independent Democrats who caucus with Republicans in New York State.
Oh, yes.
And make it so that even though the Democrats have a majority, they don't have a working majority.
Right. Why work, I say.
Yeah. So apparently there's still some work going on to try to primary some of these turncoat Democrats, which I think is really cool. And I thought I would mention that and get that in our lightning round just to make sure we don't forget that. But another thing that New York Democrats are doing right now, New York Democrats, according to ABC News, have hatched a plan to get a look. It's a cunning plan. I think Baldrick did this from one of the old Brit sitcoms. New York Democrats have hatched a plan to get a look at Donald Trump's tax records by crafting a piece of legislation designed to get at his state returns that does everything but mention the Republican president by name. The bill introduced this month in New York Senate and Assembly would require the state to release 5 years of state tax information for any president or vice president who files a New York State return.
Huh. Okay.
While Trump's state return wouldn't include all the details from his federal return, it would offer the public much more information about the president's potential conflicts of interest or how his finances would be impacted by his own tax cut proposal, according to supporters. Democrats in New York and more than 24 states have crafted bills that would require presidential candidates to release their federal returns in order to appear on the ballot. None of these would require Trump to release old returns. New York State is in a unique position to change the national conversation, according to Democratic Senator Brad Ullman of Manhattan, because the president is a native New Yorker. Yes. Darn he is. I have to, share that with him, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of them.
This is drawing a line in the sand. Are you for transparency or not? Ullman said, this is an issue of national security.
Okay. Yeah, we won't get, I don't wonder, I never thought we would get a great deal of Russia detail out of his taxes. I assume he's hiding most of that, but still, it will be an interesting place to start, and why not leave it to the states, as Republicans always say.
Mm. And, just a note, somebody notes on Twitter, Miles Smith IV. Food for thought for some conservatives, always invoking Ronald Reagan. 2017 is further away from Reagan's election than November 80 was from D-Day.
Oh, wow. I see. I always like to make those sorts of comparisons. Let me see if I can absorb that. So we're further away from, in time, from the
Reagan.
First election of Ronald Reagan than the first election of Ronald Reagan was from D-Day.
From 1980 was from D-Day, yes.
Yeah, I guess that's true. That's one of those things about time.
Yeah.
Just, keeps going. I can't seem to. Well, I always like to make those comparisons, and that's really rather amazing. I think the fact that things are filmed in black and white makes them seem like longer ago.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
That's why.
The question is whether you dream and whether you remember in black and white or in color. But
I don't remember it in color.
Right.
Whatever happens in color.
Who's the real racist here?
Right. See, I don't see color. That's the problem.
That's your problem.
I did see somebody on the internet has made a real name for themselves. Fantastic job of it too. Colorizing historical photos. Mm-hmm. I mean, I say they've made a name for themselves. It's not a name I learned. It's just that they made for themselves.
Right. And you remember there's this person who does it.
Yes, and it was fantastic seeing a couple of things, and it really does humanizes historical figures in a way that it's weird. I mean, it's so overpowering that you begin wondering, why am I so limited cognitively that I can't understand that a person photographed in black and white is real? I don't know what that is, but we have a real problem with that. We ought to go back and kick the crap out of whoever invented the black and white stuff. They should have just waited for color. What are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. History started, when things got colorized.
That's right. And that's why the History Channel did so well initially. They had colorized Hitler movies.
Right. Anyway, that was just a bit of a summary of everything that's going on and a lot of the things that'll be coming up this week. I think that the healthcare, it's just fascinating. It's really hard to believe that Republicans are going to vote for this piece of crap. But apparently the White House is convinced they will. Now, whether that's true or not, of course, we've learned not to accept anything they say until you see it. But the fact that Ryan's office was asked as to whether or not there would truly be a Wednesday vote scheduled, and he would neither confirm nor deny, apparently, the existence of the House.
It's impossible to
He would not confirm that the House actually exists, that he is the Speaker. He would just
I don't know what you're talking about.
Really, he wouldn't commit himself on anything.
Yeah, and who can blame him? There's a theme of that from over the weekend. Let's see. In one of his many interviews over the weekend, Trump insisted that he never even spoke to Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin about his tax returns. This, despite the fact, this is what caught everyone by surprise about this, that Mnuchin, like last Wednesday or Thursday, reiterated that the president has no intention of ever releasing his tax returns. And that seems like an awfully bold thing for someone to say about Trump without having heard from him. Yeah, you can go ahead and say that. So everyone's confounded by that. And then this invitation to Duterte of the Philippines, apparently no consultation whatsoever with the State Department, such as it is. about that either. So, really working as a free agent out there, and I guess it shouldn't surprise anybody that the Speaker of the House likewise I got no idea about what the President said the House is going to do. Maybe we will. I guess I'll tell you on Monday.
All right. And then that's really, I think, the most significant stuff that happened that I wanted to bring to your attention. So that's why we did a little bit of lightning round here and there. There was no overarching theme for today other than just remembering that we're part of a world community. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the stuff going on overseas. So with that, this is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. And I thank you all for joining us and joining us every week. David will be here all week. I won't be here tomorrow, but I'll be back on Wednesday, hopefully with Joe McCarter. And whatever comes up, we'll cover. Thanks again, and take care and have a great Monday.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
Have a great May Day.
Yes, I'll try and do that for about 8 hours. After that, forget it.
Yeah, after that, then you can relax and make sure you get your 8 hours of sleep too. Take care.
Will do. Thank you. Do the same. And let's see. We'll move forward with other interesting developments over the weekend. I put a lot of things in pocket towards the beginning of this morning. Oh, let's see. Which ones are most relevant to getting us started today? Here's one that harkens back to something that was put out over the weekend. Where can I grab this? Most of you would likely have seen this at some point over the weekend. A Fox News graphic. Let's see, how can I describe this to Google? Or what should I be using instead of Google again? I can't remember. I never did start using we got great advice. I know Greg has brought it up a couple of times, a few of the search engines that we could use in lieu of Google, but I never really got in the habit of doing that. I'm just going to have to force that. But Fox News put up this graphic about unemployment figures at the beginning, or I guess the first 100 days or the first, here it is. Raw Story has the story. Everybody's got one of these. The Hill has it. Well, let's go over to Raw Story. I think I can do that without destroying my browser. It's always a little bit of a crapshoot over at Raw Story. Here we are. The 100 days unemployment rate. I don't think that's a thing, but Trump insisted we make a big deal out of the 100 days apparently, and then we weren't supposed to, and now we are again. But Fox put out a graphic, which I thought was brilliant in that, it was designed to be misread by Fox News fans as horrible news about Democrats, that they're the worst ever. And only Republicans are worth electing. And anybody who really thought about it, that is to say the Democrats that I saw sharing this thing, realized, the message is backwards. David Ferguson has a piece in Raw Story entitled Social Media, and of course, right off the bat, I have to censor the words. So he did the same thing. He put a little asterisk in the S word storm, the S storm. Social media S storm descends on Fox News over deeply, ludicrously, egregiously dishonest tweets. That's a quote. I don't know who said deeply, ludicrously, egregiously dishonest, but maybe we'll find out if we actually read the story. Don't know if we need to go through the whole thing, but you would have seen this prepared and then tweeted out by Fox News's actual Twitter account, Fox News. Easy to find. And the graphic is meant, I think, in their mind to show that Republicans are effective on reviving the economy. Because it's put this way. The last 4 presidents are listed. And the 100 days unemployment rate, or jobless rate after first 3 months, as they helpfully subtitle this, 4.5% unemployment under Donald J. Trump, whereas it was 9% unemployment after the first 100 days of Barack Obama. By contrast, again, George W. Bush, Republican, had a unemployment rate of 4.4% following his first 100 days in office, whereas horrible tax and spend liberal Bill Clinton had a jobless rate of 7.1% after his first 100 days. Of course, likely you have worked this out if you happen to have, even if you didn't see this graphic ahead of time, you would have been able to figure out, well, the first 100 days, you don't often get to do a great deal that will really impact the unemployment rate. Of course, what the graphic is really showing is that Barack Obama inherited a 9% unemployment rate from George W. Bush and handed Donald Trump a 4.5% unemployment rate. That George W. Bush had a 4.4% unemployment rate after his first 100 days is, of course, testament to the fact that Bill Clinton handed him a 4.4% unemployment rate that he carried faithfully through his first 100 days before doubling it in the span of the 8 years that he occupied the office and handed off to Barack Obama. But again, likewise, Bill Clinton inherited a 7.1% unemployment rate from George W. Bush's father, George H.W. Bush. That's the real message for anybody who actually understands how these things work over time. But since we're in the United States of America, I assume this was read as Democrats are terrible, Republicans are the best. There was a good prediction I saw this morning. Cody Keenan is an Obama, or was an Obama speechwriter, although it says 2007 to 2017. So I guess technically he still is, but I think that may be wrapped up. Did he stop in January, or did he write the speeches that he's giving now? Should we talk about the controversy surrounding the speeches now? I want to declare my mixed feelings about the speeches and the fact that the president is doing paid speeches for Wall Street. There we go. I said it. I think I have to move out of the country now. I do know the first line of "Oh Canada," "Oh Canada." So I could think about going there. If there's no room in this country for somebody who's like, well, sure, he should be able to do these things, but then I wish he wasn't because it's embarrassing to have to talk about. Is that a legitimate position to take? Is that okay? Can I stay in the country for that one? Anyway, doesn't matter. Cody Keenan, whether he was writing it for the president to present to Wall Street in exchange for large amounts of money or not, made this very great prediction of the Fox News graphics team's work for the anniversary of, is it tomorrow? Yeah. No, I guess that would be today because it was tweeted yesterday. Anniversary of the Bin Laden raid. I guess that's also today. Freedom, May, loyalty, Bin Laden, all the things wrapped up in one day. Amazing. Anniversary of Bin Laden raid tomorrow. Fox graphics team, he predicted, would come out with this one. Obama's first 100 days, Bin Laden at large. Trump's first 100 days, Bin Laden dead. And likely true. I would not be surprised at all to see them come out with that one, and to have done so seriously. All right, let's see what else we have here. As mentioned, Sebastian Gorka accepting a role outside the White House. Do love that headline. That again, Fox News. Any news in their reporting of it? Not really, other than the fact that his new role, as Greg told us, would deal with the quote war of ideas. Well, okay. Good luck to you with that war of ideas. He's going to be on the Nazi side of that war, so at least we know where he stands and all that. He was up until now deputy assistant to President Trump. Will soon, I love it, accept a position outside the White House. The mighty Casey has accepted a position outside of the batter's box. So I guess really, what a way of putting it. And a new role dealing with the war of ideas. I think I have that role too. Not sure. And let's see, blah, 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 something about going to be countering radical Islamic extremism. Also worth pointing out, I guess, Gorka served for his time in the White House on the Strategic Initiatives Group, which is at least alleged to be an internal organization within the White House, sort of an inner circle of Steve Bannon's. Steve Bannon rumored to be gaining in influence again these last couple of days, but I guess the Gorka ouster, I don't know whether that's a hit on his power or maybe it helps expand his influence in the inner circle by pushing out a potential small-time rival in Gorka. I don't know. The internal dynamics of that I don't care about. It's just about time that the Nazi got booted out of the this particular Nazi got booted out of the White House. Did this story cover it? I don't think so. I had seen one somewhere, and I don't know if I put that one aside again or not. I think I was thinking of it, and then I thought, oh, well, the Gorka thing is pretty much done. Oh, no, I do have it, this one here. I believe this is it here. The first report I saw of it under a much more mundane but probably reasonable headline in New York Magazine. Reports say, Sebastian Gorka to leave White House. That's Chaz Danner writing that one. I think this is the one that mentions Jerry Nadler's role in all this. Is this right? Do I see his name? Yeah, there it is. Okay, let's read this one. It's pretty brief. National Security Advisor Sebastian Gorka is leaving the White House, according to his Wikipedia page, which he totally didn't edit himself. But in this case, according to sources who spoke with the Washington Examiner, which, by the way, as it turns out, is where Selena Zito works, which is why I didn't know who she was. Okay, so they're speaking to the Washington Examiner, later confirmed by CNN's Jim Acosta. Gorka is an especially shady and controversial character. I like that. Even for the Trump administration, as he has been linked to an anti-Semitic far-right party in Hungary with Nazi roots. The Examiner reports that Gorka will leave the White House for a new role that will, quote, deal with the war of ideas involved in countering radical Islamic extremism, unquote, and, quote, will entail an appointment to a federal agency, unquote. Okay, so I guess that's why they say, well, he accepts a role outside of the White House, and as opposed to simply being fired from the White House. They're going to put him in something else, even though he's a Nazi. Assuming the reports are accurate, it's highly unlikely that Gorka is leaving the White House by choice, particularly following a BuzzFeed report last week that suggested he lacked the necessary security clearance to even be a national security advisor. I think that's the one we snuck in there under the wire on Friday. Also, in light of Gorka's reported links to anti-Semitic groups, Democratic Congressman Gerald Nadler submitted a request to the Trump administration in March, asking for Gorka's immigration paperwork so that the House Judiciary Committee could, quote, be assured that he did not enter this country under false pretenses, unquote. Let's check his background. Maybe he can be deported. Excellent idea. Gorka is a naturalized U.S. citizen, but who cares? You can still deport him anyway under the Trump doctrine. Born to Hungarian parents in the U.K. And that's pretty false if you ask me. Those are some false pretenses. I don't know. The former Breitbart editor, another thing worth noting, that once again they sneak another Breitbart person in there, and gun failure. The former Breitbart editor was also a deputy assistant to President Trump, specializing in counterterrorism, as well as a member of the Strategic Initiatives Group, an internal organization at the White House. They don't talk about here what that is, but probably some of the other articles that I never read you about Gorka have that information. Maybe we can dig that up. That's all on paper, however, as it may not have actually been clear what Gorka really did in the administration. A White House source explained to the Examiner. This is really rather fascinating. The source said Gorka's role has always been unclear, and said Gorka had never had national security issues in his portfolio. The guy has always been a big mystery to me, the source said of Gorka's contributions to the staff. The source said Gorka's only known duties included speaking on television about counterterrorism, as well as, quote, giving White House tours and peeling out in his Mustang. All right. But he had a few notable responsibilities, or he had few notable responsibilities. Regarding Gorka's supposed counterterrorism expertise, that claim, as well as his extreme views on the subject, deserves serious scrutiny too. The precise timetable for Gorka's departure is not yet clear. Now, the deserving serious scrutiny bit is linked here, and maybe this is, this is a different thing. I thought, does this mention it? Yeah, I told you that I had read something about some serious questions about whether or not his PhD in whatever the hell he said it was even valid. This article is a Jesse Singal entry in New York Magazine. Sebastian Gorka disagrees with his own government's terrorism statistics. Interesting. And here a screenshot of him being identified as Dr. Sebastian Gorka on Fox News. Let's see. Until recently, Sebastian Gorka, deputy assistant to President Trump and self-proclaimed expert on radical Islam, wasn't a well-known or respected figure in the national security community. In fact, every profile of him, and there have been a bunch lately, quotes national security wonks either saying they hadn't heard of Gorka until he was appointed by Trump or casting aspersions on his scholarship. Very much, really, like Carter Page. Everybody who was known to be serious in the fields in which he worked basically said, I never heard of the guy, don't really believe that he has done what he says he's done, don't really believe he's got the connections he says he's got. That keeps happening, weirdly, to, so many people on the periphery, anyway, of the Trump administration. And oddly, you've built a core White House team about whom everyone thinks the same thing. There's no indication that they have any credentials and that there's any reason to trust their ability to learn the job in any real way, ever, at any learning curve. And then, surprisingly, the people that they hire turn out to be slightly dumber than that. Well, let's see. Is there more? Should we read on with this? This one's a little bit more extensive. And as I said, Gorka's, he's not done. I guess we ought to maybe keep in mind exactly who he is and where he's going, since we don't know exactly what his next role outside the White House is likely to be. Let's read a little bit more about him. When I first encountered his name during the transition, I did a triple take. Daniel Benjamin, counterterrorism coordinator for Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, told Politico, I've been in counterterrorism since 1998 and I thought I knew everyone, but I'd never heard his name and couldn't recall anything he'd written or said. Cindy Storer, a former CIA analyst and radicalization expert, if there is such a thing, was more straightforward. He thinks the government and intelligence agencies don't know anything about radicalization, but the government knows a lot and thinks he's nuts, she told the Washington Post. As these and other articles have pointed out, Gorka, who has a PhD, I might be right about that though, has a PhD in political science from what it says his native Hungary, but he crossed out his native. Correction, his parents are from there, but Gorka was born in Britain. Is a relative newcomer to counterterrorism and simply hasn't built up an impressive academic track record on the subject. The fact that per Politico, several passages of Gorka's 2007 dissertation appear to be lifted verbatim from a Human Events article written by his wife, who works in the same field, doesn't help matters. But Gorka, who prior to Trump's inauguration crowed to Fox News that the alpha males are back in charge anyway, isn't in the White House because of his CV. Rather, the available evidence suggests he's there because of his hardline beliefs. He's an ardent proponent of the counter-jihad ideology that permeates the Trump administration, which is centered on Steve Bannon, what do you know, and Trump himself. The belief that America is locked in a global war with radical Islam and that most people don't take it nearly seriously enough, and that both the EU and the US are seriously threatened by the possible imposition of Sharia law by hordes of innocent-seeming Muslims. Before he was ousted, former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was an enthusiastic proponent as well, so two of them down. Gorka has helped spread these sorts of ideas both in his recently released book, Defeating Jihad, The Winnable War, and in his role as a Breitbart former national security editor and TV talking head. Like Gorka himself, this counter-jihad movement is not taken seriously by the mainstream national security establishment. Members of that establishment acknowledge that radical Islamic terrorism is a problem, of course, but simply don't see the epochal, black and white, civilizational struggle folks like Gorka or the counter-jihad movement's de facto leader Frank Gaffney, who also has advised Trump in the past, do. Nor do they fall in line for some of the feverish conspiracy theorizing that persistently dogs the movement. Gaffney, for example, frequently spread the falsehood that former President Obama himself was a radical Muslim, trying to help terror groups from within the White House. Rather, members of the national security establishment understand that different Muslim-affiliated terror groups have different motivations, not all of them religious, and don't see it as their role to overhype the reach and strategic strength of groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, when those groups happen to be in decline. While the mainstream NatSec community is decidedly more reality-based than the counter-jihadists, that doesn't mean it isn't also screwed up in spectacular ways over the years, of course. This gap between the excesses of counter-jihad and the more deliberate and rational approach taken by the mainstream NatSec community is inevitably going to cause tensions within the Trump White House simply because the two camps see the world so differently. Trump appointees like Jim Mattis and Flynn's replacement, H.R. McMaster, do not believe we are locked in an existential struggle against a giant Muslim conspiracy. Gorka, Bannon, and Trump do. The divide manifested itself in an interesting way yesterday morning on Fox and Friends. And what are we talking about here? This is a February 23rd article, so sometime back in mid to late February is what we're talking about here. Let's see. So the divide manifested itself in an interesting way on Fox and Friends during the broadcast. Gorka, in the course of discussing former Guantanamo Bay detainee who recently blew himself up in Iraq, and making the case for the expand Guantanamo, don't close it, toughness that characterized Trump's terror talk during the campaign, offered some very scary statistics about what might happen if more Gitmo detainees are released. We know there's at least 30, if not more than 40% recidivism rate in the people released at Gitmo, Gorka said. President Obama released lots and lots of people that were there for very good reason. And what happened? Almost half the time they returned to the battlefield. But according to the government's own statistics, that is, statistics prepared by the sorts of wonks who tend to say mean things about Gorka, that's just not true. Federal law requires the Director of National Intelligence to release a public report at least every 6 months that tracks what's happened to the released Gitmo detainees. There is, of course, a handy chart from the most recent one published in July of last year. The main thing that stands out is that the Obama years saw a much lower recidivism rate among former Gitmo prisoners than the Bush years. Since Obama was sworn in, the recidivism rate for released Gitmo inmates has been about 5.6%. This is about a factor of 10 that he's missing there. Or 12.4% if you count each and every, quote, suspected case of recidivism as a confirmed one as well. If you don't blow yourself up, but you're thinking about it, maybe you get a suspected tick mark. Confirmed, you've blown yourself up. During the Bush years, those rates were 21.2% and 35.3%, respectively. According to Human Rights First, an advocacy group, this change is mostly attributable to the fact that the Obama administration instituted a more thorough vetting process than the George W. Bush administration had in place, though there could be other contributing factors as well, such as the reduced direct combat role of the U.S. in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it simply doesn't make any sense for Gorka, in the course of criticizing the Obama administration, to claim the recidivism rate is between 30 and 40%, let alone almost half. During the Obama years, the recidivism rate was a fraction of that. There's more, of course. We might as well wrap it up. 2 more paragraphs if you can stand it. John Horgan, a psychology professor at Georgia State, a leading researcher in the field of countering violent extremism, said that he viewed Gorka's claims as emblematic of his broader disdain for mainstream national security and CVE work. The reality is he is someone who uses the credibility associated with having a PhD and associated with being an academic, he told Intelligencer. But at the same time, he wants to stand outside that and doesn't want to be held to facts and figures and evidence. And you simply can't have it both ways. Horgan, who doesn't have an affiliation with Human Rights First, also said he thought the organization's account about the difference between the Bush and Obama administration's Guantanamo Bay policies was accurate. And the broader problem, Horgan says, is that counter-jihad framing itself simply doesn't lend itself well to the careful, rational, and cost-benefit analysis-laden work that is supposed to define this sort of policymaking. Bannon and Gorka and their colleagues have framed this as an existential threat that can't be qualified, can't be measured, can't be thought about in terms of facts and figures and evidence. If we buy into that narrative, then we have lost perspective. Of course, if Gorka's ultimate goal is to promote the idea of an apocalyptic struggle between Islam and the West, it makes perfect sense that he would overstate the probability of recidivism among Guantanamo detainees. But this is just a Fox and Friends segment, relatively harmless in the grand scheme of things. What happens when it comes time to carefully evaluate a complicated pile of evidence and make a big decision about national security policy or counterterrorism? Who will win, the Trump Bannon Gorka crowd or Mattis, McMaster, and their allies in the traditional national security establishment? Well, for right now, the answer anyway is Sebastian Gorka won't be doing any of that winning. He won't be around any longer. Okay, let's see. Other things worth catching up on in reverse chronological order to when I recognized them and put them aside in pocket. Let's see. Here's an interesting one, just to put it back on the radar. I know this will make everybody sad, but we might as well put it out there. Milo Yiannopoulos is ready to revive his career, and he's got an interesting prospect on the line. I don't know whether we should believe it or not. I mean, he is, after all, a serial liar, like so many of the prominent alt-right figures. And it's clearly to his benefit to simply make this claim, so we'll take it with a giant grain of salt. Milo Yiannopoulos is starting a new, ugly, that's probably true, for-profit troll circus. It's being reported in Vanity Fair by Tina Nguyen, I think is the, if I can remember my pronunciation of that surname, Nguyen, I think is usually something real close to Win, despite there being an N in front there, but we sort of swallow that N. So Tina Nguyen, I like to put that Nguyen in there, even though that's probably just wrong. Maybe we'll just stick with it, trust everybody who tells me it's Nguyen. Tina Nguyen. Okay, Tina Nguyen, well done. What do we have to say about this troll circus? With what he says is a $12 million stake from secret investors, that's usually a good tip that they're not real. The former Breitbart tech editor, what do you know, is launching Milo Incorporated, a live event touring company dedicated to making progressives' lives a living hell. In other words, he wants to have that speaking tour that was canceled last time, and I guess he thinks it's extraordinarily important that he be able to do so. I do not. But he's pretty sure it's well worth doing. And $12 million ought to do the trick, if it's real. Milo Yiannopoulos, the former tech editor at Breitbart. Why? Did he know anything about tech? I don't think so. But did Gorka know anything about counterterrorism? No. So, there you go. Has made political provocations, often deeply offensive ones, a business model, which is fascinating to me, by the way. I offered this. I found this out on Friday, sitting in the orthodontist's office with my oldest son. And I just thought I would offer this up. I don't know if this is really valuable or whether he really did get $12 million to do it. But if anyone thinks that it would be valuable to have on the progressive side, I am really good at pestering people to the point that they get pissed off and possibly leave politics or just abandon their projects altogether. I consider myself to be, I should make myself available as a professional older brother. My younger brother will tell you that I was exceptionally good at making his life miserable, for which I deeply apologize now that I realize that I did that to him, and I shouldn't have done that to a family member. But I enjoyed it a tremendous. I got a great deal of excitement and enjoyment out of making other people's lives miserable when that was a goal of mine. I'm a terrible person. I recognize this, but I could put it to professional good use. What if I made somebody else's life miserable and got them out of politics, and we wanted that to happen? I will make my services available. I'm excellent at making others miserable and ruining their days and continuing to ruin their day to the point that they give up and go home. But I'll need $12 million in funding to do it. Milo got it, and he's nobody. There's nothing smart or interesting about him, so I suppose I should be able to get the same. However, he's supposedly conservative, therefore $12 million is his. I am supposedly liberal, and therefore I will get nothing. Anyway, so he's making a business model of it. His career seemed to have come crashing down in recent months when one of his speaking appearances at the University of California in Berkeley led to riots. Weeks later, videos emerged of Yiannopoulos seeming to condone pedophilia. That was a problem, wasn't it? Of course, he now says, I do not support pedophilia, period. It is a vile and disgusting crime, perhaps the very worst. That's what he said in a recent statement on Facebook at the time. Facebook does the best interviews, of course, and really gets in depth on these things. All right, Let's see. As the free speech... Oh, I'm sorry. I almost forgot that his allies turned on him because he, gee whiz, seemed to condone pedophilia. Yiannopoulos subsequently was forced out of Breitbart in disgrace. The American Conservative Union disinvited him from CPAC, and Simon & Schuster canceled a 6-figure book deal. But as the free speech conflagration he ignited at Berkeley continues to burn, and I guess it does, Yiannopoulos is planning a way back in. Days after releasing a video touting his return to the campus, why not? Just release that. Yiannopoulos told The Hive, that's the, I don't know what. What is that? That's the sort of the vertical under which, this article appears in Vanity Fair. I don't know how to describe that. But he told the Vanity Fair folks that he would be launching a new media venture in the coming weeks with what he says is $12 million in investments from backers whose identities he is protecting. Yiannopoulos showed me a page from the contract with the investors' names blacked out. I have one of those. Another person involved with the company who spoke on condition of anonymity was similarly secretive. Milo has the best instincts about these things, he said. I do, actually. I might as well tell you, but nobody asks. The business, which will be called Milo Incorporated, or at least Milo Inc. anyway, will be even more focused on stoking the sort of ugly political conflict that's closer to the surface than ever in these early months of the Trump administration. As Fox News remains busy with its latest scandal, Milo Incorporated promises to be the latest incumbent in a growing far-right media sphere that is overwhelmingly populated with politically incorrect and often jarring provocations once considered verboten by conservatives. Yiannopoulos will compete not only against such sites as The Blaze and Alex Jones's InfoWars, but also against his very own former employer, Breitbart, which has become a formidable force in the space after its former chairman, Steve Bannon, helped usher Trump to victory and later joined his administration. Yiannopoulos, for his part, is relying on a formula that he employed at Breitbart. He said that Milo Incorporated would be dedicated to making the lives of journalists, professors, politicians, feminists, Black Lives Matter activists, and other professional victims a living hell. Milo Incorporated, according to a press release, will also be based in Miami. With a planned staff of 30, it will be in the business of what can best be described as corporatized trolling via live entertainment, with Yiannopoulos and his investors hosting events featuring right-wing talent. The business of Madonna became touring, said Yiannopoulos in a phone interview, citing the artist's deal with Live Nation. I'm doing the same thing, but instead of signing up with Live Nation, I'm building one. I'm building it for libertarian and conservative comedians, writers, stand-up comics, intellectuals, you name it. Of course, they should all be building their own libertarian networks, but that's not the way libertarianism really works, I guess, for whatever reason. Milo Incorporated's first event will be a return to the town that erupted in riots when he was invited to speak earlier this year. In fact, Yiannopoulos said that he's planning a week-long celebration of free speech near UC Berkeley, who cares, where a speech by his fellow campus agitator Ann Coulter was recently canceled after threats of violence. It will culminate in his bestowing something called the Mario Savio Award for Free Speech. The son of Savio, one of the leaders of Berkeley's free speech movement during the mid-1960s, called the award some kind of sick joke. Yep, that's what he does. Okay. Initially, Yiannopoulos will be the company's main talent. I'm proof of concept, he said, but added that he hoped he eventually would expand the company. The thing about me is that I have access to a talent pipeline that no one else even knows about. All the funniest, smartest, most interesting young YouTubers and all the rest of them who hate feminism, who hate political correctness. This generation is coming up. It's about, by the way, and he's about to tell us who he's talking about. Who are all these most interesting young YouTubers and the rest of them who hate feminism and political correctness? Well, this generation that's coming up, it's about 13, 14, 15. And he's speaking about how many years old they are. But, by the way, just to reiterate, just in case you're wondering about, that sounds weird. For some reason that makes me uncomfortable, and I'm not sure why. He does not support pedophilia, period. It's a vile and disgusting crime, perhaps the very worst. Now, what would be more politically incorrect than being bounced out of Breitbart for endorsing pedophilia, then denying you endorse pedophilia, and then starting a pedophilia company? Well, that would be that's extremely alt-right of you there, Mr. Yiannopoulos. Good on you, staying true to your principles. So, ladies and gentlemen, mom and dad of America, if you are raising a independent-minded young neo-libertarian YouTuber between the ages of 13 and 15, I think you'd probably be safe in sending your son with Milo Yiannopoulos, who loves but also deplores pedophilia and totally doesn't endorse it. So, sign the kids up. That's the generation that's coming up. They have very different politics than most other generations. They love us. They love me. They love me. I hire them, and they love me. That is all I'm saying. And I'm going to be actively hunting around for the next Milo. That sounds super safe. I don't think they should track his movements or computer usage at all. Thank you. I just love freedom. I just wanted to let everybody know that. Okay, what else have we got here? Let's see. For our lightning round entry, we will note that Corey Lewandowski is starting yet another consulting firm. By the way, how many of these do you have to be in before? Is there any limitation to this? Because this is his 9th consulting firm. This one, however, is promising clients access to Trump. So it's kind of troubling. This, according to The Hill, Max Greenwood reporting, a lobbying firm started by President Trump's former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, appears to have used promises of meetings with Trump, Vice President Pence, and other top administration officials to win over clients, Politico reported Friday. I would venture to say, though, that most any lobbying firm probably does promise things just like that. Some can deliver, some can't. It would be just as illegal and troubling for anybody else to do it, but they're all doing it. The firm, Washington East-West Political Strategies, is different than the one co-founded by Lewandowski in December, shortly after Trump's electoral victory. A document given to an Eastern European politician, that's why East-West Political. The first one was, I can help you run for office here in the United States. And that was well, I don't know, that's boring. Who cares? What have you got that'll get me Russia money? Oh, that's different. That's Washington East-West Political Strategies. I guess this is the place that'll help you get booked, doing events that are unpopular in the United States, but popular among oligarchs in Russia. And so therefore you will get paid over there. Washington East-West, a document given to an Eastern European politician by the firm earlier this year promised, quote, meetings with well-established figures, unquote, which is to say nothing, including Trump and Pence. Washington East-West Political Strategies co-founder Barry Bennett, a former Trump campaign advisor, said he was unfamiliar with the document provided to Politico. Bennett started Avenue Strategies, Lewandowski's other lobbying firm, alongside the former campaign manager. Neither firm has yet signed any international clients, Bennett said, and lobbying and access to administration officials is a relatively small portion of their work. For that reason, he said, Lewandowski, who is not registered as a lobbyist, has no intention of doing so. This is his second lobbying firm, but he has no clients, by the way. So that's really pretty interesting. So since December, he started 2, has 0 clients, isn't registered, but has, more money than you and me somehow, arranging these things. Pretty soon, though, he'll be sued for a good portion of it by somebody who said, you promised you would introduce me to Trump and Pence and other important figures, and he'll be in court saying, I didn't promise that. I said I would introduce you to prominent figures, and then I gave a bulleted list, which is also a bunch of names of people who are prominent figures, but I didn't say that you would meet anyone or everyone or any combination of the two on this list. In case you were wondering what is a prominent figure, I thought I'd give you some names. 90% of our business, this is interesting, Bennett says, has nothing to do with access. Of course, they don't have any clients, so they don't have any business, and there is no access, and there's no, so right, 90% of our business is nothing, apparently. 90% of our business has to do with being a Sherpa, who to call, what to do. We don't take people in to see the president or the vice president. This is true of most lobbying, and I guess that's also should be pointed out. I mean, it's interesting. It's amazing what you can get paid for in the lobbying industry. I have an issue and I want it to be a part of the public policy of the United States. Well, here's my advice to you. You should call some legislators. And if you have a regulatory scheme in mind, call some regulators and tell them that you would like that. And we will write down the things that you would like and we will send it to those people either in the mail or deliver it to their offices. Now, will you please pay me $100,000? Oh, yeah, right. Sorry, I fell asleep there for just a second. Certainly, absolutely. Let's pay you. Let's make sure that happens. Lewandowski has maintained relatively consistent access to the president, visiting the West Wing several times since Trump took office and calling him directly. He's just not doing that for anybody else. He's just charging them money in case they ever decide they would like to ask him to do that. Okay. Moving along from that item, let's see. What else have we to add here? Let's see. I just want to note for the record, I heard over the weekend about the Fire Festival, F-Y-R-E. I hope you did too. It's a terrific story. I feel bad, of course, for any individuals who might possibly be nice people who found themselves stranded at a horrible music festival that didn't happen, right? But it sounded kind of hilarious in the abstract. When it was a story about a bunch of rich people paying too much money to go to a fabulous resort, and then they ended up not having a fabulous resort and instead being stuck in disaster relief tents with no music going on whatsoever and everybody out several $1,000s. That did sound kind of fun. Let's see. Other interesting stories. Oh, yes. Over the weekend, it became clear that Jim DeMint, you remember him, former Senator Jim DeMint, then he left the Senate to become head of the Heritage Foundation, although I guess it was sort of the Heritage Foundation Action Fund thing, kind of. I don't know. It was never clear exactly how they were arranging things for him over at the Heritage Foundation. But he was a big muckety-muck there, and we never really did get to figure out the structure of how it worked, but it doesn't matter because they're kicking him out. He, too, will now be accepting a role outside the Heritage Foundation. DeMint to be ousted, this according to Nancy Cook, Eliana Johnson, and Ken Vogel at Politico. The controversial, they're always so controversial, the controversial president of the Heritage Foundation, that was his job, former Senator Jim DeMint, will soon be out of a job following a dispute with board members about the direction of the conservative think tank, according to 3 people with knowledge of the situation. Some Heritage board members believe that DeMint has brought in too many Senate allies, interesting, and made the think tank too bombastic and political, which was exactly what it was before, really, but I guess he's exacerbated things, to the detriment of its research and scholarly aims. Okay, fine. Whatever your excuse is, I don't care. There's also a sense that he's made the institution too much about himself. He has been a congressman and a senator. They are solo performers. When you are in the Senate, life is all about the senators, said one board member who asked for anonymity to speak candidly about DeMint's situation. CEO skills are different than senator skills. I think it boils down to attributes. I don't think it is particularly personal. DeMint has been in contract negotiations, which are expected to be cut short, the sources said. An announcement about his future at Heritage is expected to come within the next few days. His contract is up at the end of 2017, according to one board member. A handful of Heritage staffers close to DeMint who came over from the Senate with him are also expected to leave the think tank in what 2 sources called a purge. A GOP operative who works closely with Heritage said DeMint's removal as president was imminent and that more changes are expected to follow. There's massive turmoil over there right now, the operative said. Sources described what amounted to a feud between the leadership of the think tank on the one hand and its political arm on the other. There really aren't 2 arms, but okay. Heritage Action, despite its reputation as the uncompromising ideological enforcer, had in recent months been working to soften its sharp edges and even to reach out to Democrats. Some folks perceived that the C3 side was not going along with that, the 501c3 side, I guess, that they were being a little more bombastic or less willing to deal with anyone except the most pure conservatives, said a source familiar with the situation. The tension came to a head at the organization's annual leadership meeting last weekend in San Diego, where the frustration of donors and board members with DeMint's hardline posture reached a boiling point. The organization's approach to Obamacare repeal was a particular point of contention. Although Heritage Action opposed the initial version of the bill, the group has said it is neutral on the current iteration, while DeMint and his allies continue to push for a full repeal. As news of DeMint's ouster broke, President Donald Trump praised the Heritage boss by name during a speech to NRA members on Friday, calling DeMint amazing and a real friend. DeMint could not immediately be reached for comment. Reached by phone, the chairman of the Heritage Board, Thomas Saunders, said he was too busy at the moment to talk. Former Heritage President Ed Fielner is expected to take over as interim president, according to one House Freedom Caucus member. Fielner did not respond to requests for comment. I wonder what the Freedom Caucus thinks of this. I'm not sure where they stand in all this. Researchers and policy experts inside Heritage have not been clued into the possible leadership change, according to interviews with a handful of them, though there has been a sense inside the building that something is afoot. If Heritage pushes Jim DeMint out, it was because of a few board members who are close to the Republican establishment, never wanted him to be president, and have been working to push him out ever since, said one operative who has worked with Heritage. DeMint is one of the most respected and selfless conservative leaders in the country, and pushing him out would be a big mistake. In recent months, DeMint has raised the profile of the think tank by closely aligning it with President Donald Trump. Last July, DeMint met with Trump transition officials for several hours and made it clear that if Trump won, he wanted to have a close working relationship with the administration. Of course, if he was meeting with transition officials, although, remember, they do have transition teams before they win. That is true. I shouldn't say that sounds weird. DeMint allowed the think tank's employees to join the Trump transition team while keeping their day jobs. Many did, and they fed policy ideas to an ideologically flexible fledgling administration. A handful of Heritage policy wonks took White House jobs, including budget expert Paul Winfrey, now number 2 at the Domestic Policy Council. Winfrey helped to write Trump's first budget proposal, which called for deep cuts that mirrored an earlier Heritage policy plan. One board member stressed that the number of Heritage officials, not just DeMint, a lot of them have deep ties to the administration. DeMint has injected Heritage into a number of high-profile, high-stakes policy wars in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. However, DeMint insisted that Heritage was not political. In an interview with Politico late in February, we see ourselves as a resource. We're not really decision makers. We're not lobbying or driving a process here. But it's our hope to influence lawmakers in a way that moves the country in a positive direction. They're playing an old game here. I think I described it once in discussing the differences between sometimes the 501c3s and 501c4s. That they got away with a lot of lobbying 501c3 groups and even C4 groups by pretending they weren't lobbying, by simply saying, well, we're just making policy recommendations to no one in particular and not making any electoral recommendations. Don't elect this group or this candidate or that candidate just because they happen to support this policy position that we support. That's up to you. But we just thought we'd point out that we think this thing is great. These are the reasons for it. And one side actually likes it, and the other side is a bunch of communist, filthy, terrorist bastards who don't. Have we said something wrong? All right. Well, let's see. I think that probably sums it all up, and likely enough. Let's see. Oh, by the way, it says here, DeMint earned a salary of $1.1 million in 2015 from the Heritage Foundation, according to the organization's tax filings. DeMint and a DeMint ally who's worked with Heritage and the Trump administration on policy proposals said the timing of the push to oust DeMint is ironic because I don't think Heritage has been more relevant than they are right now. They were deeply enmeshed in the transition and in a lot of policy in the Trump administration. So, unilateral disarmament? Maybe. Good thing, bad thing? I don't know. We'll reserve judgment. But anytime Jim DeMint suffers a ding, I think that's a pretty good thing. Let's see. Anything else that we needed to, let's see. Now we're back to things from Friday. Oh, and I'm reminded of that fun time we had reading about, what's his name over who's married to the woman who works at Mar-a-Lago, Heather Rinkus, Ari Rinkus. That was a good story. Did you finish reading that one over the weekend? Let's see. We should probably catch up on some of the proposals that are likely to shape what gets done in Congress during this upcoming week. Whether or not there is a health care bill that they're going to be able to bring to the floor, that is a big question mark, isn't it? And we discussed last week extensively the situation that led them to exempt Congress from Obamacare repeal, but which they insisted they would fix with a standalone bill later on. That was also quite entertaining. And I guess, what I don't have is, and I wonder if we should check back and see whether any of the articles that Greg provided us has a more extensive discussion about it. But it did become pretty clear yesterday. Let me check the Twitter feed because I know that there was a lot of stuff that I saw and retweeted and didn't necessarily set aside that indicated that the president had little to no idea of what he was talking about, or, as we said, was just outright lying about the health care plan that may or may not get a vote on Wednesday or any day this week. Specifically, Jake Sherman's tweets here. We were looking at a Politico senior writer and co-author of their playbook that comes out each morning, was tweeting, and I think this was him watching. I see that there's. Let me grab this talking points memo. Fact check that I see flying by on my Twitter screen at the moment. Well timed there. I'll take that. Let me scroll and keep things moving here. But let me go back to the Sunday morning tweets from Jake Sherman, who was saying, that was striking in the interview on, I think, Face the Nation, that Trump was saying, or Jake was saying, that he can't, that it appeared that the president cannot really describe the differences between the versions of the health care bill that were before him. Let's see if I can scoot back in Jake Sherman's timeline and just see what it was that he was saying yesterday and whether he has updated them at all this morning. Let's see. I have to move forward a little bit here. Let's see. So here he is reacting to Trump's tweet of yesterday, saying healthcare plan is on its way. We'll have much lower premiums and deductibles while at the same time taking care of pre-existing conditions, right? And as you know, that was like hugely confusing to everyone because you have to either conclude that he doesn't know what's in the bill or that he's lying about it, because the bill as outlined, I mean, what we've been able to tell from what's been released about it doesn't protect pre-existing conditions. Of course, I suppose it's possible that Trump in his mind sees it as, yes, it does. You're not allowed to exclude people from coverage because of pre-existing conditions. It's just that you can charge them whatever you want to cover them if you find that they do have a relevant pre-existing condition or even an irrelevant one, really. And in his mind, limitations on dollar resources have never been an issue for me, but for everybody else, if paying $10,000 a month in premiums is too much, well, then I guess it could be said that you don't have access to health care now, but I don't know. I mean, maybe you shouldn't have bought that iPhone, dude, and you should have concentrated on paying your premiums instead. So that's essentially what was going on here. He was being interviewed on Face the Nation, and he said, no, we actually won't be putting people in danger of not being able to afford their coverage because of pre-existing conditions. And it wasn't that he was simply using a different definition of access. It was instead he was actually sitting on Face the Nation, according to Jake Sherman. Anyway, I didn't see this show. He was actually sitting there saying that Republicans will not allow states to opt out of the pre-existing conditions coverage, and that would be a huge development, a total reversal of the entire point of this. What was it? Was it MacArthur, the amendment? The one that was being discussed as the reason that Trump Care, Zombie Trump Care 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, whatever version we're on now, was supposedly going to be revived last week, but wasn't. The only reason that they thought they could get away with telling people they had enough votes to pass this thing was that they had reached an agreement to allow the states to opt out. But Trump was on the Sunday talk shows where you're not supposed to lie about that stuff or they're going to totally catch you, saying, yeah, actually, we are going to prevent the states from opting out on that. And all of what you read last week about bringing this thing to a vote by having found a compromise that makes the House Freedom Caucus happy is really untrue. So what the hell exactly is going on? Well, I haven't caught up with it, but it looks like they did over at Talking Points Memo. I'm sorry. I credit Talking Points Memo only because that's the title I see at the top of my screen. It is, in fact, the AP, which I see a little bit further down the screen. Calvin Woodward and Jim Drinkard at the Associated Press. TPM has merely aggregated this news and turned it around to me via Twitter under the TPM banner, which I really always found rather disingenuous, but it works. It gets clicks. AP Fact Check proclaims TPM News. Are Trump's health care protections real? I don't know, but there's a fantastic picture of him with leathern skin and pursed lips, credited to Andrew Hammock, I think, if I can read the small type correctly, of the AP. Well done with your photo there. It's getting really puffy around the eyes. I don't think he's going to make it. Anyway, I'm not a doctor. President Donald Trump is promising that the latest Republican health care legislation will cover people with pre-existing conditions beautifully. That's what it says, quote, beautifully. Such reassurance is not to be found in the bill that's under review. In a TV interview Sunday, an op-ed in the Washington Post, and a rally Saturday night in Pennsylvania, Trump vigorously celebrated a 100-day stretch that actually produced little in the way of legislative achievement. His aides, meanwhile, began a hard sell on his tax plan over the next week. Tax plan, of course, being the wrong terminology for it. We'll remind you where we stand in that he has decided there will be 3 tax brackets, but he doesn't know where they begin or end. He simply knows that they will be taxed at the rates of 10%, 15%, or rather 10%, 25%. I don't know if I have it right. 10%, 25%, and 35%. And he doesn't know who will fall in which bracket. He does know, however, that the tax cuts involved will pay for themselves through increased revenues. From whom? In which tax bracket? I don't know. There's no way of knowing. And in fact, even under the most dynamic scoring you can think of, how could you possibly conclude with any confidence that the tax cuts will pay for themselves if you don't even know where the tax brackets begin and end? I guess you could make that up and keep working on it until you get one that says the tax cuts will pay for themselves, but I don't think that they've even gotten that far. Anyway, so there's that. Here's a look, AP continues, at some of the assertions by the president and his people, although it does say the presidents and his people. I think that's a typo. Trump. He says, when I watch some of the news reports, should I even bother doing the voice? I don't know if I could do it today. When I watch some of the news reports, which are so unfair, and they say we don't cover pre-existing conditions, we cover it beautifully. Pre-existing conditions are in the bill, and I mandate it. I said, has to be. Has to be. Now, this was on CBS's Face the Nation, so I don't have any idea how he actually delivered it. We can go and take a look and see how well I guessed. But I think I was reading that in rally voice and wrong venue, so I'm not certain that we got it right there. By the way, I love that one. I mandate it. So that's it. So pre-existing conditions are in the bill, and they are. It says you will not have that, and I mandate it. So what? The facts, of course, say this. Although the bill says access is guaranteed for people with pre-existing conditions, it is silent on a key point, really the only point, that is, whether such access must be affordable. President Barack Obama's health law requires insurance to take all applicants, regardless of medical history, and patients with health problems pay the same standard premiums as healthy ones. But the Republican legislation would let states opt out of the requirement for standard premiums under certain conditions. If a state maintains protections such as a high-risk pool, it can allow insurers to use health status as a factor in setting premiums for people who have had a break in coverage and are trying to get a new individual policy. Such complications were in the proposed legislation under review last week, prompting the American Medical Association to say the Republican protections, quote, may be illusory, and the American Cancer Society Action Network to worry that the plan could return the U.S. to a patchwork system that drives up insurance costs for the sick. It's possible Trump will demand stronger protections for sick people in the bill, but he said on Sunday that the legislation was already so good they could have voted on Friday. But they didn't. But they could have. That's how good it really is. Just so you know. I just want you to know that. Trump, on the first attempt to repeal and replace Obama's law, this bill has evolved, and we didn't have a failure on that bill. You know, it was reported like a failure, but it wasn't a failure. I don't know if you know this, but it was not. It was a huge success that it was probably as big a success as you could have without actually voting on or passing the bill. The facts, of course, say the first bill was pulled from Congress without a vote being taken because it did not have enough support. The effort has evolved, but the bill flopped. Now here's a comment by Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin on Trump having no intention of releasing his own tax returns ever. Quote, the president has released plenty of information, and I think he has given more financial disclosure than anybody else. I think the American population has plenty of information. Well, that's pretty amazing. But of course, the facts say otherwise. Should we even bother? Trump has released less than other presidents in modern times. By withholding his tax returns, Trump has fallen short of the standard followed by presidents since Richard Nixon started the practice in 1969. During last year's election campaign, Trump argued that he couldn't release his taxes because he was under audit by the IRS. That reason didn't hold up because being under audit is no legal bar to a candidate from releasing tax returns. On Wednesday, Mnuchin seemed to abandon even that explanation. What Trump has released are financial disclosure forms that list his assets and liabilities in broad ranges required by law, but those forms don't disclose precise numbers, and they include nothing about a person's income or charitable giving, data disclosed only in tax returns. The few Trump tax returns the public has seen weren't released by him, but disclosed by news outlets. 2 leaked pages of his 2005 return that came out in March didn't include full details on income and deductions, but did show that he would have benefited massively by an elimination of the alternative minimum tax, a feature of his just outlined tax plan. And 3 pages that surfaced last year showed he had claimed $916 million in losses on his 1995 return, which could be used to reduce his taxes by offsetting later gains. Let's see, Mnuchin also talking about the quote-unquote tax plan and saying it's going to be the largest tax cut, the biggest tax cut and the largest tax reform in the history of our country. Of course, we don't know because we don't know what the tax brackets are, but the facts say apparently not, somehow. At first blush, the tax cut proposed last week looks smaller than President Ronald Reagan's in 1981, which were the biggest ever. That plan reduced federal revenues by almost 19%, according to a Treasury report. In today's dollars, that would mean a tax cut of more than $600 billion a year, or well over $6 trillion in the next decade. An early analysis by the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates federal revenue would probably drop about $5.5 trillion over a decade under the Trump plan. I guess they had to make up some numbers about the size of the tax brackets in order to do that. That would leave them shy of Reagan's record breaker. That assumes all elements of the plan are approved by Congress, which is unlikely. The biggest ever claim is also made on the one-page outline of the plan. Trump economic advisor Gary Cohn more realistically called it one of the biggest. By the way, apparently Gary Cohn also caught by surprise last week or the week before when Trump said we're going to have a tax plan out by next week. He hadn't consulted with Gary Cohn either. I guess that's the way he wants to operate. He simply announces things that he wants to happen, and everybody else has to go make it work. They haven't done that yet, but they show up for the press conferences and they hand out paper. There's just nothing on it. Let's see. There's the Mnuchin claim that the tax plan will pay for itself with growth by reducing deductions and closing loopholes. The facts say tax experts are skeptical. They're backed up by history. Reagan's steep cut in 1981 contributed to years of deficits, even after he was forced to raise some taxes in subsequent years to stem the red ink. President George W. Bush's 2001 and 2003 tax cuts were also followed by large deficits. No tax cut. No tax cut has ever been self-financing, said Howard Gleckman, a senior fellow at the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center. In its analysis of the Trump plan, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget said no achievable amount of economic growth could finance it, and it would drive the debt to 111% of the gross domestic product by 2027, compared with 77% now. The group advocates for deficit reduction as a pillar of economic growth. That's their problem. And it is a problem, isn't it? Alan Cole, an economist at the right-leaning Tax Foundation, has calculated that Trump's corporate tax cut alone would cut federal revenue by $2 trillion over 10 years. Growth would need to accelerate to 2.8% a year from its current pace of about 2% just to pay for that tax cut. But Cole forecasts growth would increase by only half that amount, resulting in ballooning deficits. Let's see, Gary Cohn here says, we are going to cut taxes for business to make them competitive, and we're going to cut taxes for the American people, especially low and middle income families. How'd they do with that one? The facts say, based on the outline, such as it is, there's every reason to believe the wealthiest people in the United States will receive the biggest cut under Trump's plan, though many low and middle income families would benefit too. The lack of specifics makes it hard to say precisely how the cuts would be distributed. But the plan is similar in outline to Trump's campaign proposal, which would have given nearly half of its benefits to the wealthiest 1% of Americans, while middle-income households would have received barely 7% of the cuts. The White House is also proposing to eliminate the estate tax and the alternative minimum tax, both of which primarily impact upper-income Americans. The AMT is the separate tax calculation intended to ensure that richer people don't avoid paying most or all of their taxes by claiming multiple deductions and credits. In 2005, Trump himself paid $36.5 million in taxes, mostly because of the AMT. Without it, he would have paid just $5.5 million, according to a leaked copy of that year's return. The biggest windfall for rich people would come from Trump's plan to lower the top tax rate for small business owners to 15% from 39.6%. The true effect will depend on how the Trump administration defines a small business owner. If the tax cut applies to all businesses in all business income reported on individual tax returns, it would be a huge benefit for many wealthy families. Mnuchin said Trump will propose safeguards to prevent rich people from taking advantage of this tax cut, but provided no details on how that would work. Well, given that the guy was collecting money for small businesses impacted by 9/11, because he said, oh, well, this one building I own is its own business and has nothing to do with the Trump organization, and the only person who works for that business is the building manager and the janitor. So we're a small business, so give us lots of money because we were so totally impacted. And he wasn't. Anyway, let's see. One or two more such fact checks? Sure. Let's indulge. What else do they need to be fact-checked on? Yes, this was an interesting reversal over the weekend. This one having to do with military and foreign policy, an area we don't cover all the time here. Trump pressing for South Korea to help pay for the billion-dollar THAAD anti-missile system. That's THAAD. I don't know what that stands for. Look that up. What is that for? I'm just curious. I always like those acronyms. Google, rather than anybody else, tell me. What is that? Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. Interesting. Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. I guess that's blowing up incoming missiles at high altitude. That's the terminal part. Formerly Feeder High Altitude Area Defense, which is a United States Army anti-ballistic missile system designed to shoot down short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles in their terminal phase using a hit-to-kill approach. That's a great approach. When it comes to military stuff, I am a big advocate in hit-to-kill. Mostly, I think those of you would, how do we explain that? If you were trying to shoot something down, you would try to hit it in order to shoot down. And I mean, that's a real thing. I mean, you could simply detonate a gigantic nuclear level explosion in the general area of an incoming ballistic missile and take it out that way. But hitting it is always best. Okay, that's true. Besides which, then you don't have to use nuclear missiles to stop the destruction of a nuclear missile, which is a terrible idea and a terrible trade-off. A high-altitude nuclear detonation to save you from nuclear strike, not really much of a bargain. So, yeah, I'm for hitting things to kill them. Okay. Anyway, pressing for South Korea to help pay for the billion-dollar THAAD anti-missile system the U.S. is providing for the country's defense. He said, "It's phenomenal. It's the most incredible equipment you've ever seen. Shoots missiles right out of the sky, and it protects them, and I want to protect them, but they should pay for that. And they understand that." Says his interview on Thursday with Reuters. The facts, I guess, are somewhat different. The president is clearly in sales mode here because the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, they said it right here, and I hadn't scrolled down. I didn't have to Google anything. Anyway, it's not as sure bet as he portrays, for one thing. Most interceptors usually aren't as sure as they say they are. It is being deployed in South Korea after at least a dozen successful tests, but things that work well at home on the test range don't always go as smoothly when deployed, said Jonathan McDowell, an astrophysicist at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. That's the best place to be an astrophysicist, if you ask me. I don't want to pick and choose winners and losers as among centers for astrophysics. I just want to say it's better than McDonald's. A salvo of multiple North Korean short-range missiles, for instance, could overwhelm THAAD, if they have enough of them, said David Wright, co-director of the Union of Concerned Scientists Global Security Program. And the system will be deployed about 125 miles south of Seoul, so it's out of range of a greater metropolitan area that is home to 25 million people, about an hour from the heavily armed border. It cannot engage missiles fired at Seoul, so it offers no additional protection of the city, Wright said. Well, geez, that is interesting, isn't it? But just to catch some of you up, if you are old like me, then some of that logic will A, make sense, and B, sound familiar. You remember, of course, Star Wars and the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, and it was, in the end, I think, mostly defeated by the simple mathematics of things. A 99% effective system could very easily still be overwhelmed by the extraordinarily large number of warheads, reentry vehicles that the Soviet Union was capable of deploying at the time. And if they simply deployed enough of them, several thousand of them, even a 99% effective Star Wars SDI system was going to let through, statistically speaking, enough weaponry to pretty much wipe out 75+% of the population of the United States, and certainly almost all of our productive infrastructure as well. So it was a bit of a problem, and I think that was probably one of the biggest contributing factors to its demise. Similarly, this has it has the same issue. I mean, again, a 99% effective THAAD system can be overwhelmed. I guess there's some question about whether or not the North Koreans have the capacity to overwhelm it. But I guess problem number two is that everybody lives in Seoul, and the THAAD missile system doesn't defend Seoul. That's going to make it a tough sell. And even if they do have to pay for it, or we do ask them to pay for it, I don't know that they're gonna. Well, geez, this doesn't protect like the bulk of our population. I don't really know if I want this product. Well, you have to, and you have to pay for it. In addition to which, and this didn't even make it into the fact check, maybe because it happened too late for the fact check, but apparently over the rest of the weekend, the rest of the defense and national security infrastructure said, about that. The U.S. is really actually going to pay for that. We'll install that. We'll cover the cost for that. I think it might have been even Jim Mattis himself, who days later just said, he didn't say the president doesn't know what he's talking about or the president's wrong. He just said, don't worry about it. We're paying for that. He says Korea has to pay. I say, no, they're not paying for it. And that's all there is to it. So, I don't know. I don't know why that didn't really make it into the fact check. I guess that probably happened afterwards. Obviously, it would have made it into a fact check if they had known it, I would think. Let's see. There's one or two more that we can cram in here. That's a good way of catching up with the weekend. Trump tweet on the tactics of the two jurisdictions that challenged his order to penalize cities that don't cooperate with U.S. immigration officials. Remember that? They used to call this judge shopping. Messy system. We figured that one out, of course. It's hard to argue this was judge shopping. The two California governments that sued to block Trump's order, San Francisco and Santa Clara County, routinely filed in the court in their neighborhood, which is, of course, in the federal system's Ninth Circuit. No, they don't get to choose their judge. That's assigned through a system that resembles a lottery. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, Trump says, with its 3 of its orders have run into roadblocks as a terrible record of being overturned, close to 80%. Finally, a fact check on that one. I knew it was wrong, but let's see what the fact check says. That's misleading, they say. The nature of the appeal system means that most circuits have high rates of being overturned. The fact that the Supreme Court agrees to hear a case means it's likely to overturn it, but other circuits have seen their decisions overturned at a higher rate. In the most recent full term, the Supreme Court did reverse 8 of the 11 cases it heard from the San Francisco-based court, but the Atlanta-based 11th Circuit went 0 for 3. That is, the Supreme Court reversed all 3 cases it heard from there. And over the past 5 years, 5 federal appeals courts were reversed at a higher rate than the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth is by far the largest of the 13 federal courts of appeals, which means that it has, in raw numbers, more cases heard and reversed from the Ninth Circuit year in and year out. But as a percentage of cases the Supreme Court hears, the liberal-leaning circuit fares somewhat better, according to statistical compilations by the legal website SCOTUS blog. So there you have it. A little bit of a clarification on that front. All right, a few minutes left here to round up some other items along the way here. Let's see if anything jumps out as particularly necessary item to work into today's show. Oh, you know what? There's a couple of things I didn't get to the other day, and I guess one of these days we're going to have to take a look back now that Milo is coming back and targeting Berkeley. We'll take a look back at exactly what the hell is going on over there. There's been some interesting writing on that. Just to catch up with an item that happened during last week, not to very much notice, but it should have probably gotten more notice. I thought it was interesting. Katie Couric. When did she do this? This was April 26th, so middle of last week. She, I guess, for some reason decided to talk to Kellyanne Conway. I'm not really certain why anybody would do that anymore, but part of her interview that she was tweeting about was this one here from the 26th. This happened in the evening of the 26th. Kellyanne tells me, this is the first time since 1881. This is another one of these weird bogus metric things, like his first 100 days thing. He was still rolling into the, oh my God, I got to show everybody how great I am in the first 100 days. Tells me this is the first time since 1881 that a president has had a SCOTUS justice confirmed in their first 100 days. I thought that was an extraordinarily interesting thing to even bother to claim for a number of reasons, not the least of which is, all you're really saying here is, I mean, how do we come by vacancies on the Supreme Court? Well, either by resignation or a death in the court. Well, did you know that this is historical stuff here. President Trump, it's the first time since 1881 that anybody has either died or resigned so quickly, except, of course, that isn't what happened. I mean, one, that would have been the claim normally. So had all of what happened during the last year of President Obama's administration not happened, it still would have been a meaningless claim. Did you know that this is the fastest a Supreme Court justice has died in a president's administration since 1881? I did not know that. I did not know that that was interesting either, and I find that it is not. I find it's interesting that you think so, but it isn't. But worse than that, of course, we all recall that seat was held vacant for over 400 days. I mean, they're talking about, do you realize the speed with which I filled this vacancy? You mean the longest held vacancy ever? Now, not all of that is necessarily directly your fault, per se, because you weren't even in the Senate to have done this. But, of course, you urged them to hold this thing open for you. They didn't think they were holding it open for you, but whatever. Anyway, this seat was vacant for 400 days. There was nothing speedy about the way it was filled. And even absent that, there was nothing speedy about the way it was filled. As it turns out, no nomination has ever taken more than 125 days to get a vote. So filling a vacancy inside of your first 100 days, and on the late side of your first 100 days, by the way, is actually pretty weak. I would actually have to count that as a failure. The longest nomination ever, besides this one, was 125 days, the longest period that anybody was ever pending. And the average, by the way, over all of history, and this is a little bit misleading because back in the day when somebody died and you had a nominee the next day, that's going to fool with things, right? But the average is 25 days. 25 days. That's just a little bit over 3 weeks from vacancy coming open to having a new justice in place. So bragging on getting it done in 100 days, I don't know really how wonderful that actually is. In other words, as I was saying last week, this is not only a meaningless metric, but it's actually a pretty significant failure in comparison with other nominations. For instance, let's say, one of President Obama's last ones that they actually allowed him. Sonia Sotomayor was installed 66 days after the vacancy that allowed her to take a seat came open. 66 days from vacancy to swearing in. How long did it take Gorsuch from Trump's swearing in to Gorsuch's swearing in? The answer, or rather not Trump's swearing in, but Trump's nomination of him to the swearing in, 66 days. Isn't that interesting? That's about the same. I would say, by comparisons, 66 days under Obama is probably a lot like 66 days under Trump, except, of course, the 66 days over Trump sucked a whole lot worse than the 66 days under Obama. So really, he's made no improvement whatsoever, and the idea that there's anything historical or recognizable about that is bogus and ridiculous. Of course, Kellyanne Conway was likely to have said, well, no, I wasn't saying that there was anything historic about it. I'm just simply saying it's the first time since 1881 that a president has had that happen. Of course, by framing it as being the first time since 1881, that's it's a pretty big hint that you were looking for some sort of historical hat tip there, and it really shouldn't have happened, and it really shouldn't have been a mystery to Katie Couric how that was being presented, and I'm sorry that she appeared to have let that go without any further comment, at least on Twitter. Maybe her write-up of the interview was a little bit more thorough about it, but anyway, just goes to show you what they're up to over there all the time, trying to make things look historical and significant when they have so little to work with. Anyway, there's plenty going on, and the guys in the after show will pick up the ball in just a few minutes. A newly released report reveals that it might have been John Barron, claiming to be a mook named Carmine, who threatened a business enemy over Trump's failed Atlantic City casino. That sounds like a hell of a story. By the way, much more I'll tell you about after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Yes, more than just murder plans for our opioid addicts underway here. Ivanka hawks the family's new Manila development as dad invites Duterte to the White House. And Donald Trump wants you to know he won the election, especially after all that complaining about all that winning. Much more, plus all that stuff coming up on the last half on the after show next.